Alrighty. So, last video of the season, probably. I might do kind of like a recap video with lessons learned and things like that, but if I do, it won't be for a while. I'll maybe recap the Super Bowl. We'll see. This is kind of the last video I'm planning on for the season until next year. So Super Bowl time. So only one game to break down. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to break down the Buccaneers side of the argument, the Chiefs side of the argument, what I'm ultimately picking, and then just some prop bets I like with some rationale. So for the pro Buccaneers side, and so I'll spoil it now, I guess. I end up going towards Chiefs -3 or -3.5, depending on when you bought it, and I'll get more into the details of that. But initially, when I saw that line come out, I jumped on it. And as the 2 weeks have passed, I've definitely gotten more scared, and I'm definitely fearing the Buccaneers a lot, and kind of realized that -3 is a really fair line that was set. So the Buccaneers, I think the key points why you might think the Buccaneers are going to win this game is, first of all, they have a talented roster, especially their defensive line, or their defensive seven. You got studs in there. Vita Vea is back. He was back for the NFC Championship game. Played some snaps, but now he's had 2 more weeks to rest up for the Super Bowl. I always thought when they were bringing him back for the last game, it meant more for their next game. That was just some snaps, get some playing time in. 2 more weeks to rest up and get ready for the Super Bowl. I think he is going to be ready to go, playing almost 100% of the snaps here. They also got, Jason Pierre-Paul, Shaquille Barrett, Devin White as a linebacker, just a bunch of studs in that defensive front seven. And then on the other side, Chiefs' offensive line is in shambles right now. I mean, they've been bad all year. Couldn't run the ball in short yardage, couldn't punch things into the end zone. Everyone always talks about, they are so creative in the end zone. They do those little push passes. They do that because they have to, because they tried to run the ball twice and Clyde Edwards-Helaire got stuffed. They do that because they have to. They cannot run in short yardage, and the Buccaneers is the toughest run D in the league. I guess they had the lowest run percentage of any team, where teams just don't even try to run on them because their defensive line is just that good. So I'm not expecting the Chiefs to be able to run the ball at all. I think they're going to be able to get after Patrick Mahomes and really pressure him. This is a really tough matchup. They're the Bucs defense, and on the offensive side of the ball, the Bucs are really talented as well. I think their offensive line has kind of been questionable all year. Some weeks they don't play very well. Some weeks they do. They've been pretty solid lately. The 1-2 punch at running back I understand that's not the way they are used, but they have 2 pretty solid running backs in Fournette and Ronald Jones. And then their wide receiver core. I mean, you got Chris Godwin, who's finally healthy and back. You have Cameron Brate, who has a back injury, but you also got Gronk floating around. You got Mike Evans, who is definitely a big-time red zone threat. You got other contributors like Scotty Miller and, what was the Tyler Johnson, the Gophers wide receiver, that rookie who likes to contribute. Just a really talented roster. And then you got Tom Brady under center, who has won some Super Bowls before. This will be his 10th Super Bowl, and he's won 6. So he'll either go 7 for 10 with a 70% winning percentage, or 6 for 10 for a 60% winning percentage. So I actually think this game matters quite a bit for Tom Brady's legacy, because if he loses, he'll be 6 for 10 in Super Bowls. You can make the argument he was, barely above 500 in Super Bowls. He just was there the most because of the Patriots, whatever. Versus if he wins it, then he's 7 for 10. It's a much more favorable win percentage there. So we'll see what eventually happens here. I'm interested in that angle for the Patrick Mahomes storyline, because if let's say Patrick Mahomes wins this, he's 2 for 2 in Super Bowls. Meanwhile, Tom Brady is 6 for 10 in Super Bowls, right? So then Patrick needs to win 1 or 2 more. If he can not lose as many Super Bowls as Tom, which would be 4 for Tom, he would definitely be in the conversation, even if he doesn't get to 6 Super Bowls, which who knows what'll happen. But I'm sure you guys are kind of tired of that talk. Jumping into the Chiefs side of the argument. So this is ultimately the side I landed on, Chiefs -3. I just think when you look at the whole season, man, the Chiefs, they're really coasting through a lot of those games. A lot of games they would fall behind in the first half, and then they'd finally get on their horse and show up and decide, oh, it's time to play football, and then they do what they need to do to win. But then in playoffs, they're not playing that way. They understand that this is playoffs, it's time to win. So they definitely got their foot off the gas, or on the gas. Now, I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of that slow start phenomenon. At least we haven't seen it in the playoffs so far. But yeah, I think you got to give them credit because the Buccaneers during the regular season, super talented roster, and man, it just felt like they were never reaching their potential. And I think a lot of that had to do with Bruce Arians not being a particularly good coach, and maybe just some personalities in the locker room. But they they would look phenomenal one week, and then the next week they would just shit the bed, have a ton of penalties, and just like not show up. And it was kind of like that, up and down, up and down, up and down throughout the season. Now it's playoff time, and it's Tom Brady, so maybe they'll have their head out of the ass. But the overall point being, when you look at the one season history here of the Buccaneers, you see inconsistency. You see times when they just showed up and they weren't ready to play. And I think that's a product of Bruce Arians. Meanwhile, you look at the Chiefs, sure, they showed up and sometimes they were slow to start, but when it was time to play, they got their heads out of their asses and then they made sure they won the game. And now that they're in the playoffs, I think kind of some of that first half coasting, a lot of that coasting is kind of gone. So I think, to summarize that better, when the Chiefs needed a play, they needed a drive to win the game, they consistently came through. Where the Bucs were in a tough division race all season, and we're not coming through in those kinds of moments. So ultimately, that's what pushed me over to the Chiefs side. Am really concerned about their offensive line and what the Bucs defense is going to do, but the Bucs offense doesn't necessarily scare me as much as it probably should, because Tom Brady in the second half of the NFC Championship game sucked ass, threw 3 interceptions. I was cheering hard for him to upset the Packers, and it seemed like that he did everything he could to just throw that game away. Like they were still throwing the ball, even though I thought that the Buccaneers were running effectively in that game, and they were ahead. I don't know. It seemed like they were very committed to the pass in Bruce Arians fashion, when I didn't necessarily think they needed to be, and really did their best to try to choke that game away, turning the ball over a couple times with some just questionable decisions and not the best throwing. So Tom Brady. So what I say? So I got coaching, just that consistent reliability of coming through in those kind of clutch moments. I kind of don't like the term clutch, but like, you know what I mean, like, when they needed to play, they got to play, whereas the Buccaneers kind of were up and down. Tom Brady really not playing that well in the playoffs. And if you look back to their last matchup, there was some of this coasting going on. I mean, it seemed like the Chiefs, for that game, understood that the Bucs were one of their big challengers. And they prepped like it was a playoff game, and they show up, and boom, right in like the first quarter, first half, Tyreek Hill goes for 200 yards, almost sets records. And they just blow up, get out to like a 20-plus point lead. And then they took their foot off the gas. And slowly, little by little, the Buccaneers were able to chip back into the game. And they ended up covering, which pissed me off, because I had bet heftily on the Chiefs that week for whatever reason. But again, this is the playoffs. This is the Super Bowl. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the Chiefs are going to show up. They're going to score points, and they're not going to stop this time. They're not going to let off the gas and let Tom Brady kind of chip his way back in the game. I'm feeling more confident in the Chiefs' ability on defense to kind of stop that, because again, we're seeing kind of that playoffs Chiefs defense, where kind of a middle of the road defense all season, and in the playoffs they start to make plays, they start to do well, and I think they got some talent in that secondary. One of my prop bets is I bet Tyrann Mathieu to get a pick. I think Brady is going to cough the ball up a few times, and ultimately lose that turnover battle. Like I don't see a scenario where the Chiefs Patrick Mahomes throws more interceptions than Tom Brady. I think the turnover battle is probably going to go in the Chiefs' favor. And that's just another reason I think the Chiefs -3 is the side I'm playing, and I'm kind of playing into some storylines, or not storylines, but transitioning over to the prop bets. Kind kind of playing into the idea that Chiefs are going to win and it's going to be an offensive game, even though I am scared of that Bucs defense and things kind of sputtering out of the gate. And it's perfectly possible that those defenses show up to play, and the Chiefs defense has, and they can frustrate Tom Brady absolutely. And the Bucs defense, especially early in the game, I think they could definitely get after Patrick Mahomes and keep the Chiefs off the field a bit and make it hard for them to get anything going downfield. And I know the Chiefs are not going to be able to run the ball, so it could be really dangerous. But I end up betting my props as if it's going to be a Chiefs offensive powerhouse. So one thing is quietly, Byron Pringle for the Chiefs has played the most snaps of any Chiefs wide receiver. Sammy Watkins has been injured kind of through this playoff run, and not really expecting him to show up. So one of the prop bets I took was Byron Pringle to have over 7.5 receiving yards, and I think there's another bet for like over like 1.5 receptions, which both of those are pretty good bets. I think the odds were better on the 7.5 reception yards. I mean, in his last 3 games, he had 6 targets, 3 targets, 5 targets. The lowest was that 3 target game. Let's see, I have it up here. He had 52 receiving yards, 14 receiving yards, 22 receiving yards. So he's been used pretty effective, or pretty decently throughout the playoffs. I expect that to continue, just because the Chiefs kind of have a lot behind Tyreek Hill. They kind of have a mess of wide receivers, a lot of really fast guys, not a whole lot of like reliable guys, and it seems like Byron Pringle, for a guy who most people probably don't know who that is, I didn't know who that was, has been pretty consistent. Next kind of bet angle I guess I'm taking is these running backs. So I don't expect either team to be able to run the ball very well in these games. So I bet heavily on Leonard Fournette unders. I bet him under, I think it was like 78 like rushing and receiving yards, and then under like 41 rushing yards. I just don't think that's going to be a gain script where the Bucs get ahead and are able to run the ball on the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs are going to be able to keep the pressure on and keep it more of a pass game script. I also think one of the reasons we were seeing so much Leonard Fournette is because Ronald Jones was hurt. And Ronald Jones, I think, after having 2 weeks off here to get ready for the Super Bowl to rest up and get healthier, I think Ronald Jones is going to be more of an even split there. I don't, especially with how much of a liability Fournette. I guess they're both liabilities in the passing game, and Fournette still kind of has that role, but I don't know. I think we're going to see a little more Ronald Jones than people expect. I think he was definitely a good deal in daily fantasy, just because all season it was back and forth between these two guys, and there was times where Leonard Fournette was completely a non-factor, and now everyone seems pretty confident Leonard Fournette is the guy, just because he was the guy in the last couple games in the playoffs. But we've had 2 weeks. The injury situation is not the same as it was, and I think that's kind of a common theme in a few of these bets that I'm taking. So I'm betting heavily against Leonard Fournette. Darrell Williams is another guy I'm betting heavily against, and I think that's his numbers have been going down, the over-unders. So I think a lot of people are kind of taking this angle, but bet against his under 27.5 rushing yards and under 41.5 total yards. If you look at his stat sheet and nothing else, like he'd been the guy more or less in the playoffs, and he'd been getting a lot of work. But again, we've had 2 weeks to get Clyde Edwards-Helaire healthy, and he is the guy. He was in the regular season. The only reason Darrell Williams was seeing so much work is because of injuries to Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Le'Veon Bell. And Le'Veon Bell's still kind of on the injury report. Not sure how much his role will be. But I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to be healthy and back and ready to play this game, more so than he was in the other games. So I think Clyde's going to kind of retake his role. I think Darrell Williams is not going to see a whole lot of work, and they're not going to be able to run the ball anyway. So I feel pretty confident kind of sliding Darrell Williams. Another one, which is kind of injury-related, kind of name-related, is I'm taking the under on Antonio Brown yards. And this is just kind of a bet on Antonio Brown. Didn't play in the NFC Championship game. He isn't fully healthy. He's not at 100%. The Buccaneers have other wide receivers. They don't have to use Antonio Brown. So that's why I took the under on Antonio Brown's yards. I was thinking about doing the same to Sammy Watkins for kind of similar reasons, just because he's been banged up, but I didn't end up pulling the trigger there. But kind of a parlay, if you will, or just playing off the idea that Antonio Brown might see somewhat limited work just because of injury, was Scotty Miller over 1.5 receptions was at plus 130. So I mean, if Scotty Miller gets enough playing time with Antonio Brown, kind of still somewhat dealing with I think it was a knee. Scotty Miller might get some work, and he needs 2 catches for that bet to pay off. So I took Scotty Miller over 1.5 catches. I'm just gonna do a quick glance through and see if there were any other prop bets I like. Um, I took a first score and to win Mahomes rushing touchdown at plus 2,800. Just thought so. It was my $2.80 to win $80. So at those odds, I really like that. Probably not going to happen, obviously, but I heard quietly Patrick Mahomes led the Chiefs in rushing touchdowns. I heard that on a podcast, so and I believe it. Like just the situations. If this is a high scoring game and there's some short yardage touchdowns, it's probably not going to be Clyde or Le'Veon Bell. Like honestly, by the stats, it's more likely if it's going to be ran in, it'll be Patrick Mahomes. It'll probably just be a pass at that point, but I'm just kind of was attracted by that logic, so I took that bet. I took Jason Pierre-Paul. His over/under sacks was at 0.5, so I took the over there at plus 110. Hopefully JPP gets a sack. I took Tyrann Mathieu to get a pick at plus 300. I think Brady's going to turn the ball over, probably more than once. Maybe it'll get caught by a corner, but Tyrann Mathieu is definitely the most talented guy in that secondary for the Chiefs. So I took that bet. I feel pretty good about that one. I don't know which of the corners I would pick to get an interception. So maybe I'll do a little more research and see if I can bet on Rashad Breeland to get a interception, but probably won't. Any other ones I got here? Tom Brady over 0.5 rushing yards. This one I actually do like. I'm glad I didn't forget to bring this up. So Tom Brady, I looked at it, and in a lot of games he had negative rushing yards, like kneel downs at the end of the season, but there were at least 6 games where he had positive rushing yards during the regular season and in the playoffs. So I don't know if that's 18 games, let's say. Whatever, don't think about it. So the thing is, though, you can't just look at regular season games and be like, oh yeah, Tom Brady doesn't usually run, and he doesn't normally run, but this is a Super Bowl. So I think it kind of goes out the window what happens in the regular season. I think it's more likely for Tom Brady to try to, pick up a yard or two on the ground in a Super Bowl situation. And he's one of the best when it comes to QB sneaks. So, if I can get one QB sneak in there and the guy keeping stats doesn't screw me on some Tom Brady sack and call it a rush and a loss of 4. As long as I don't get kind of screwed in one of those situations, and who knows, maybe there'll be a trick play or something, and Tom Brady will be able to get outside the pocket. So I just like that idea of him getting at least 1 rushing yard. Another one I liked, I don't quite see it, not seeing it on here, but another one I think I'm kind of playing around with in my head is players to complete a pass is it's plus 215 on DraftKings for over 2.5. So let's think about that, right? So most likely the only people in a normal NFL game, the only people throwing passes are the starting quarterbacks for each team. The only way you're going to get a third person attempting a pass, I actually like attempts better than completions, and that's one's at plus 155. So the only way you're going to get someone else to complete or attempt a pass is either one of these QBs get hurt and the backup comes in, boom, you got 3 people completing a pass. That's not really the angle I'm playing. The angle I'm playing was, this is a Super Bowl, and weird things happen, and you get things like the Philly special and trick plays, and we got Andy Reid and Bruce Arians as the 2 head coaches. And I just think, Tom Brady's gone out for a pass in the playoffs before. I think he's caught passes. He's caught touchdowns. I know Julian Edelman threw him a touchdown at one point in his Patriots career. And Antonio Brown, although I did slight the idea that he was going to play, and I wouldn't really trust him at this point, but he's thrown some passes in his career, and I distinctly remember him throwing a lefty pass while being pressured for a touchdown. So there's definitely a possibility that some kind of trick play comes out. Maybe even on a punt. Punter tries to complete a pass. So the over 2.5 pass attempts, or more than 2.5 players to attempt a pass, is another one I like. I'm not going crazy with it, but I don't know. That's the fun. Normally, I don't really dig into prop bets and get into all these things, but it's a Super Bowl. You gotta have some fun. So that was another one I thought was fun. So about that's all I got. Just in summary, I got the Chiefs -3 or -3.5, depending on where you're at. Don't feel great about it just because of that Bucks defensive line, offensive line, but ultimately they were the team. -3 is a really friendly Chiefs spread. When you look at all the Chiefs spread throughout the season, usually it's much more than that. They're a very good team, really talented offensive weapons. Worried about that offensive line, but ultimately, when it came down to crunch time, the Chiefs always came through. They came through basically every time. Meanwhile, the Buccaneers have been pretty inconsistent throughout the season, and at times, especially in this playoffs, they looked like a great team and were on fire, but other times they didn't. And the whole 3 interceptions in the second half of the NFC Championship game has to weigh on you. And that's where I'm at. So good luck with any of your prop bets, any of your bets. Let me know in the comments if there's an angle I missed, if you think I'm an idiot or some of these prop bets are just idiotic and you have reasons why. Let me know. Would love to engage. Anyway, have a good Super Bowl Sunday.